Okay, welcome to the next phase of building. This is next weekend, and we've decided to press ahead and go ahead and get our shear strakes glued on. These are the pieces that go along the side of the boat that make up the sides of the cabin. And in the assembly manual, it says to have the seat tops down, to have the seat tops installed already. The reason we're going to press ahead and put the shear strakes on, even though it'll be a little bit more cumbersome working in the cockpit, is that this is Taylor's last week before she goes back to her job as a teacher. And so this week she can get all the filleting and glassing done like we've done here on the hanging knees. Is going to be the same up on the shear strake. And so if we can get the shear strakes installed this weekend, then she's going to work on that during the week, and that will be a huge step towards getting the cabin done. And hopefully in the next couple of weeks here we'll have the boat flipped over so we can finish the bottom. So a couple things to point out. We've got our temporary gunnel on, and it's proud of the shear, the side panel, and that creates a little rabbet for the shear strake to sit into, which makes it really easy to set it up on the boat. One of the things that we'll have to do now is come in here and bevel the ends of all these bulkhead beams. This one I've already sanded a little bevel onto, but see how this sticks out proud of the notch in bulkhead number 1. That's going to get beveled back when I install the inwale. The inwale is going to sweep through these notches, and so everywhere it passes through this notch, this is going to get beveled and beveled. And back here, this should have been notched out. I think that's corrected in the kit now, but the inwale is going to go straight on through bulkhead 3 here and stick back about 12 inches, and that's going to allow us to pull a rope between the ends of the inwales, and that's going to let us set the curvature of the inwale right in this area between these two bulkheads. If you just stopped it here, you'd end up with a being artificially flat in this section because of not being any end moment on this panel. So I'll show you that in a little bit, and then once we get the inwale glued in and the shear strakes on, we can go ahead and fit our deck beams and whatnot. I just cut our inwales. These are out of 1x6 pine, and these are 5/8 by 1.25 inches. And I went ahead and cut a 20-degree bevel on the top edge. This one I messed up and I cut the bevel on the wrong side. See how it's got a curve to it? So I'll put that curve towards the stern end, and it'll actually be bent this way around the boat. And I just tuned these up with the block plane just to smooth out the face, get rid of any saw marks. Here you can see the temporary gunnel, and notice how it stops here. This is not how it should be done. This temporary gunnel should run all the way to the transom, because what you run the risk of is having a flat spot or a too round of a shear line here. So when I stop that there, I run the risk of having a flat spot back here, a hard spot right there, and I'm being really careful to avoid that. And I'll probably clamp another board underneath that one temporarily, just to double check that this is a fair line. I just got lazy when we were assembling the hull. Those are the longest pieces that I had, and so I've already put in this cleat here, which kind of acts in the same way as the one on the outside to help fair this panel. But I'm being really careful to make sure that the shear stays a sweet line. Here's the shear strakes on the bench getting sanded up. We just picked up this little quarter sheet sander. Now they come with these larger vacuum ports, so we've adapted it to the vacuum cleaner, and that's working pretty good. And we've already got these shear strakes glued up. In fact, we glued them up quite a long time ago, which made it real cumbersome around the shop. I would have, if I had realized, I should have waited to glue these up. But in any case, these have all the bulkhead and hanging knee locations drawn on them, which makes it really easy for reference when we set this into the boat to see where the hanging knees should go. But also when we set them in place for good, we'll be using that as a final opportunity to make sure the forward bulkhead is plumb, making sure this face is perfectly plumb for the main tabernacle. And also there's a couple of pieces that go here between the sides of the sliding hatch, and we'll go ahead and fit those in because we can use those kind of like a measuring stick, because we know that exact piece has to fit in that exact spot, and so that will help us to position the shear strake and where the bulkhead 3 intersects the shear strake out here. Okay, I'm beveling the beams on the ends of the forward bulkhead and the hanging knees so that the inwale will fit into these notches. And so we tried to eliminate the beveling that you needed to do in the kit. So for example, the forward bulkhead, it's not beveled at all when we put it in the boat. Same thing for the hanging knee. There you can see we've just butted it up against the hull, and then the process of doing the fillet, gets enough thickened epoxy in there to complete that joint. So the outermost edge is this forward edge because the hull is, tapering in towards the bow. And so when we get up here to the beam, when we're beveling this doubler on the front side, we only need to bevel it to the forward edge of the hanging knee. This is the forward hanging knee, and it's the same way on the aft hanging knee, although there's very little beveling that needs to be done on the aft hanging knee and on this bulkhead, because they're already relatively, the hull is almost at its widest point back here. But up on the forward bulkhead, there's a lot of beveling. And so on this one, the aft edge of the bulkhead itself is my reference edge. So the only beveling I really need to do is of this beam that's glued on. And the way I'm doing that is I've got my inwale, which I cut, and it has the 1/4 inch roundover on the inside edge, and I've got a 20-degree bevel sawn into the top of it just to help me to do some of the rough shaping. And so I'm laying the inwale into these notches, and up here, for example, I'm just laying it across the forward bulkhead and the first and the second bulkhead. And wherever there was a gap, I scribed the gap with a pencil, and then I made a there goes the level. I made a special sanding block that has a 1/4 inch roundover on it, and that sanding block fits my spacing here, so I can sand this bevel down to my line, and I can put pressure on it inboard pressure to sand this face, and then I can put downward pressure to finish out this round, and it makes a really clean fit up. We've got both shear strakes fitted now, and I couldn't quite get them with the port inwale in, so I popped that out temporarily, but you can see here where they overlap, and I've got the other garage door open because I just couldn't squeeze around it. But I spent some time getting the shear strakes lined up with the front of the boat, and I'm going to tighten these wires. You want to be able to see the boat head on when you're doing this, because you can really end up with a crooked nose if you don't get this perfectly in line. So you want to follow the line up the stem, and it doesn't take much to be out at the front of the shear strakes to have a crooked line here. So be real careful when you're doing this that one trick is to dangle a straight edge at arm's length and try to stand about 10 feet away from the boat, and that helps you to sight it. You could also use a plumb bob. You can hang a string and sight it that way, but that's just a couple of tricks. So I'm going to get this tightened up, and then I'm going to cut the bevel on the front of the inwales and get them to fit nicely right at the top of the top of the stem here. Okay, now I have the in-wales beveled at the top of the stem, and they're fitting together pretty nicely. The top wire was in the way, so I just put a drywall screw through the top, and I've got the middle wire and the bottom wire wired tight. Also, because of the way the panels were bending, the shear strakes were wanting to lift up above the shear. So I pulled them down to close the gap, and then I put in a drywall screw up at an angle. And there it is coming in from the inside, that screw right there. And here you can see where these don't mesh, we're gonna come in here and put a block, a little plywood scrap block, and screw it to the bottom one, and that'll bring that in fair. We actually don't have a plumb bob, but I do have a chalk line, so I'm using that as a plumb bob. I've got it hooked onto my garage door, and I just eyeballed that it was in line with the center line of the boat and approximately the middle of the main tabernacle. And so now I can step back and use that to check my stem for plumb. And it looks like based on that, it's pretty close. If anything, the top of the shear strakes need to go a little bit to the right, but it's pretty daggone close, so we might just call that good. This is one reason, or one reason you might build the boat facing outside the garage so that you can sight the bow when you get to this step.